Marta, wonderful Marta, back once again, and I'm delighted to have you here again.
I am excited, very excited, because I feel it's become a little ritual, a monthly ritual that I feel it's as much as it's an incredible gift to your audience, to my audience, it's part of our self-care to have those conversations for you and me. I love that. It's just so awesome to be back again. So thank you for having me.
Because if people don't realise, they help us as much as they help everyone else, don't they? They really do.
Absolutely.
We come into these with no preconceived plan or notion, and we're happy to let them unfold as they should. But today I came across, it wasn't today actually, but I thought we'd use it today. I came across, when I was doing some research a little while ago, a great study, and I think it's really relevant, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. So basically, I think it's from 2014, and it was done at the University of Virginia, and they had a group of volunteers who they kept in a room, isolated, on their own, with no technology and no outside stimulation. They were just there with their thoughts, alone in a room for 15 minutes. I think they gave them a journal and a pen if they wanted to write, and I think that was it. What they also did is they wired them up to an electrode, and they had a button which they could press and give themselves a minor electric shock. If they did that, the experiment ended. So their choices were pain from an electric shock that they self-administered, or sitting in a room quietly by themselves with their thoughts for 15 minutes. 65% of the men and 30% or so of the women chose the electric shock rather than sitting in the room. That, to me, is staggering. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm very aware of that experiment, and I talk about it to all my male clients. More
thought
so
you would
the girls as well, but the guys more than anything. And it's just fascinating. I feel there is several factors contributing to that, one of them being social conditioning, and how men for generations have been taught to shut down their emotions, not pay attention to their thoughts, not pay attention to their feelings, just get on with life and be the provider in whatever way, shape or form. A very old school approach is obviously to go to work, bring money, and while your woman stays at home and brings up the children and cooks and all of that. So it's just, for so many of us, and especially guys, it's so challenging to be on their own, to even acknowledge the fact that there's something else going on other than the day-to-day reality, whatever is immediately presenting itself to us. But even if whatever is immediately presenting itself in front of us, and that triggers something, stimulates something painful or uncomfortable, or even exciting and full of joy, it doesn't matter. It could be anything in terms of the wide spectrum of emotion. It's either ignoring it or shutting it down or brushing it off and moving on, because you can't bring yourself to pay attention to it, because what if it hurts on the other end? But yet at the same time, they'd rather electrocute themselves and give themselves a physical painful experience rather than experience something that might be uncomfortable on an emotional level. It's fascinating to watch.
It's incredibly fascinating, and I think it's very relevant with what's going on at the moment, because this, I believe, is our fourth individual show together. You've become quite the regular, and I think this is the third one we've done when we've been in lockdown or around lockdown, and people are let's say having to look more closely at themselves during this period, because there's only so much you can do in a day to get away from your thoughts, to get away from self. And when some of those things are taken out of the equation, you find yourself alone with your thoughts quite often. And I'm reminded of that Blaise Pascal quote, that man's problems come from his inability to not be able to sit at a table by himself. And this research reminds me of that so much.
Definitely. And if you think about it, only yesterday I had a conversation with one of our male clients, and some of his quotes were around the conversations he's been having with people around him, whether it's over the phone or FaceTime or whatever, where everyone says to him, we're eating too much, we're drinking too much, we're bored, and we're uncomfortable.
Right.
And we feel a bit meh. That's literally how he described it. And he said, you know, I've had a bit of a low week and I didn't feel that great and whatever. What he didn't understand at the time, he realizes that now, is that over the last 2 or 3 months, he's done so much exploration and intense work on himself, understanding his mind, his stories, how he speaks to himself, how he treats himself. He was just ready for it to start with, completely blink it and shut off, focus on the external circumstances. But something clicked at some point, and over the last probably 6 to 8 weeks, all he's been doing is looking inside and within, because he was just ready to do it. But when we do that, when we expand into a greater awareness of ourselves or anything, it could also be external. For him, it was the internal world. We get to experience, after the expansion, we get to experience the contraction. So what was going on for him was just that moment where he gets to stop reading all the books, analyzing every thought, listening to audible books or podcasts or whatever on every walk with his dog, is just allowing himself to just go and breathe out into the new environment he's created, and hear for himself the new world inside him that shows up also around him. It's that moment of integration, that moment where I've done all the work, I'm looking at it now, and I'm absorbing it. He didn't realize that's what's going on, so he started giving in to the thoughts of all his friends and acquaintances, thinking, oh, it's just a lockdown, oh, I had way too many beers last week, and I've been eating not that great. If you think about it, the dude maybe had a couple of beers a couple of times in that week with dinner. Majority of people right now will be drinking every night, every day, watching Netflix all the time, eating all the shit that they would normally eat over Christmas, because it's like a however many weeks we've been in lockdown now, several week-long Christmas break.
7 weeks,
Right? And it's fascinating to be able to just pause and acknowledge the fact that it could go either way for us, but we get to choose. We've talked about this before, I'm pretty sure, where it's not really the circumstance that dictates our outcome, it's our attitude towards it.
Absolutely.
And if you do realize that you're numbing with watching Netflix all the time, there's nothing wrong with sitting and watching Netflix for a day. But if you've been doing that every day for 7 weeks, there's something you're avoiding, right? If you're constantly reaching out for food, we know that emotional attachment to food is so strong for us that the moment we're uncomfortable, we reach out for something that brings us comfort, usually relating to some fond memories of us and our parents or our siblings when we were kids and stuff like that. There will be a reason why someone reaches out for donuts and another person for chocolate and another person for something else. It could even be savory stuff like cheese or whatever it might be, right? There is a reason why we're reaching out for food, first of all, to get that dopamine hit that we might be missing, because the whole world has been on a massive dopamine detox over the last several weeks, right?
That's true, right?
And I felt it. I literally felt the biochemistry in my brain changing during the first 2-3 weeks of lockdown. So people have been going for food, for, you know, Netflix, alcohol, all of that stuff to get that dopamine hit. But then there is another layer to it where we're seeking a very specific connection and comfort as well, to avoid looking at whatever is going on in our lives. And I don't even remember how we started this thread and where we were going with this, but it's just fascinating to be able to even explain to my client yesterday that it's not what he thinks is happening, because he only just gave into the totality of the greater societal perception, if you like, of what's going on right now. For him, it was a very different experience. And immediately after that conversation, he didn't feel as guilty. He took shitloads of pressure off of himself. And he actually went, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy my dog walks this week without my headphones in and just see what comes up and see how I can get more familiar with the new way of thinking and being with myself. And, you know, you get to be brave, I think, in a way, to be able to do that. And it takes guidance. And I know that you guide your people, your clients, your tribe, your community. Cliff and I do that with our clients and our community. It takes bravery, but also vulnerability. But I don't think there's ever been a time better than this time right now for us to do that.
No, I agree.
But not many are able to choose into that because they're afraid, and that's okay. But it's understanding that it's okay to admit to the fact that you might be shit scared of what's inside there.
It certainly is, and you know, you come up with so many good points there, and I've been scribbling furiously to write them down
Yeah.
because they deserve more discussion, and we'll probably get this is now going to be 2 podcasts worth of discussion, the amount of words
Probably.
that you've dropped, right? But 2 things that really stand out, first of all, from what you've just said, which was amazing. It's stillness. The concept of stillness is one that is starting to fascinate me more and more as I watched the world before lockdown fly around in its normal pace. No one's got any time. Everyone's avoiding everything. Everyone's trying to get everything done at once. Everyone's multitasking. Everyone is not finishing what they're doing because they're on to the next thing. And then you've got someone like something like the lockdown that happens and forces everyone into a slower pace. And people have tried initially, I think, to keep the pace going by just doing stuff. When that stops, when you just can't do that in the environment you're now in because you run out of things to do. You now have to think about being still. You now have to examine in some way this concept of stillness. I've just read Ryan Hollywell's book, Stillness is the Key. I don't know if you've come across that one.
No, I've not heard about that one.
You'll love it. It's a fantastic read. It really is. But stillness, man, what a concept. What do you think?
I used to be very uncomfortable with being still, very uncomfortable. And do you know what? It's interesting because I only wrote about it this morning, and it's awesome that it's coming up right now. That the restlessness in us as human beings, it doesn't only come from our stories, our emotions, our perceptions, and what our minds are doing. Because it will largely come from that, because the stories and the perceptions and the attitude towards life and what we do and don't believe in drives our physiology. However, if there is kinks in physiology that contribute to that restlessness, and I use myself as a personal example, when Cliff and I did a form of genetic testing on me, and remember that genes do not dictate our destiny. Yeah. There is way more to that. We can have predispositions, and Cliff and I always say that genetics might load the gun for us, but it will be our lifestyle that will pull the trigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we look at epigenetics and the concepts of, which means above genes, the concept of the environment affecting our genetic expression, that can dictate whether we tap into those predispositions and expose ourselves to symptoms, diseases, whatever, imbalances in the body, or whether we don't, because we don't need to necessarily activate those expressions, right? However, in my example, what's going on? I have a couple of impairments that basically make me produce hormones that are responsible for stress and neurotransmitters over excitatory and stress related neurotransmitters very quickly, right, and in large amounts. Yep. But what then happens after that, I don't clear that stuff out of my system very efficiently.
Okay. So it's still circulating in your system. Yeah.
Yes, it keeps floating around and circulating in my system. Therefore, it doesn't necessarily have to be a stressful situation in the way we understand and perceive stress, anger, frustration, sadness. It could be that, but it can also be excitement. It could be something that I'm really focused on. If I'm working on a project, if I'm working on a piece of content, whatever it might be, creating a program, working with clients, I can feel it now. I understand my body to the level where I can modulate it, and I know what to do to counterbalance that. And not just through diets and supplementation and stuff like that. It's day-to-day behaviors and even in the moment behaviors, but it can build up so quickly when I'm literally like this. And I'm thinking, what is going on? I don't know what to do. And I feel like my head is going to pop, like I'm going to take off. But now I know what happens is just all of those chemicals regulating stress are building up and floating around my system, that I just get to take a moment, calm down, take a few breaths, whatever it might be, just take a break from what I'm doing and come back to it when I allow my body to go, ah. So how did we get onto that? Again,
we're talking about stillness, right? You're just going off on tangents.
I'm just going off on like consciousness streams, forgetting where I started.
Just downloading shit, right?
Downloading shit, exactly. It's like, bah, I love it. And that's why I really, really, really struggled with stillness. I could not sit still. I couldn't read a book without playing with my hair, or I couldn't like watch anything without playing with rings on my fingers, clicking a pen, or just picking something. If I had a button on my shirt, I would be playing with the buttons, whatever. There would always be something that I had to do. And when I actually started exploring it from the perspective of, on the more emotional, spiritual level, lack of safety, not understanding the concept of safety, on the physiological level with those predispositions of all those stress chemicals circulating in my body for way too long. When I understood what was on either side of it, I was able, with that awareness, like Cliff and I always talk about, awareness, responsibility, action, right? I was able with that awareness to take responsibility and do something about it. So reducing alcohol consumption. I don't really drink coffee that much, but you know, nothing excitatory like caffeine and stimulants and things like that. I don't really put that in my body. Coffee, decaf occasionally. Not overstimulating myself with like video or audio stimulation late at night before bed. So taking responsibility for what I can do to manage it and help my body allowed me to sit in stillness. And now I can sit in stillness and fully enjoy it. Sometimes I still get jittery, but I'm able to process and decide why that's happening. If there's something for me to attend to that I get to do, or whether I'm just being overexcited or overstressed or whatever, and I'm able to sink into that. But if you think about it, going back to the whole concept of stillness and us almost being forced into it against most of people's will, if someone has those predispositions that they don't understand, if someone doesn't understand their emotional stories and attachments to certain events and experiences in their life, they can't find that place of stillness. If you think about it, for me, sitting in stillness, creating, writing poems as a 16, 17-year-old, or stitching stuff up and creating like makeshift handbags and whatever, like I used to do all sorts of creative stuff, and I would work through the night being so engrossed in it. But in my adult life, I was really struggling to be able to dedicate that time for stillness, painting, reading, whatever. I would get really jittery from the physiological symptoms, aspects and contributions, like I said. But I realized at some point that those times as a teenager and even earlier as a kid, being still and creative were connected to my dad not being home.
Right.
My dad used to drink a lot when I was a kid, and he would never be home. He would either be home drunk and asleep, or he wasn't at home because he was out drinking.
Okay.
And I found peace and comfort in poetry, in stitching, and in sewing, and drawing, and things like that. But I understood that association was to ease the pain of not knowing if my dad was going to come home or not away. That's why I was doing it. So as an adult, I didn't let myself do it because I didn't want to bring those painful memories back.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just, I'm sharing loads of personal examples because I'm hoping that it will trigger certain, you know, in certain people, certain memories and things to help them feel a little bit more at peace with the fact they might be struggling with stillness, because we can be so hard on ourselves that we can't sit still, we can't meditate, we can't read a book in peace because we were like, read 2 pages and go and make a coffee, read 2 pages and go look out the window because you heard the noise, whatever, right? There could be so many distractions. But there's always a reason. No one's broken, no one's messed up, no one's wrong. There will be reasons that if you're brave and ready, you'll start exploring. And if someone's listening to our conversation and hearing those words, how do we know we're ready? Because you're hearing about it. You're listening to this, right?
Yeah. Because you're here, right? If you're here, you're ready. Yeah.
That's how you know.
And I love that. I love everything you say. And I think that we as a species need to be a bit kinder to ourselves. I think we're very hard on ourselves. I think we look at, and we've spoken about this before, and you know, when we do these shows, there's going to be a bit of crossover because, you know, there is only so much information, and we try and bring it to everyone in so many different ways so that we can stimulate people to think about what we're talking about. But you know, I don't know where I was going with this now. I've done exactly as you was. I was off.
I love it. It's just like, open your mouth, let it fall out.
Open your mouth and let it come out. You know, we're so harsh on ourselves. We look at people that are doing stuff that we see that, and we think that they're successful, and we can never be that way. We're just not like them. and they're fortunate or they're lucky or they're different in some way. And that's not the case. It's just usually that we're a little bit hard on ourselves and just need to
And
sit back a little bit.
we only see such a small and
We
tiny
do.
snapshot of someone's lives when we
Mm.
compare ourselves. And a beautiful, beautiful thing one of my mentors said last week, in one of her group calls, where she said so many people are so in awe of her, and some people are genuinely inspired, and that's why they become her mentees, because they want to learn more from her, right? But other people are either envious or intimidated, and like you said, they feel they can never have the life, have the business, have the mentality that she has, right? But she said, how many of you guys would want to have been homeless several times? How many of you would have wanted to be rejected by your parents? How many of you would have wanted to be put in foster care? And all of this shit, she just reels it off. People would know her story if they're working with her, very likely, because you get to know your mentors, right?
You do,
because it's really truly the energy that you connect on, rather than the physical. We tell ourselves it's what she said on her sales page or whatever. Bullshit, right? It's the energy.
It is.
But it goes over our head very often. And, you know, if people look up to me, one of my clients a couple of weeks ago just said, you come on these calls and you're so vibrant and you're just so full of energy. You're just that shining light. I want to be more like that. How do you do this? Like, what did you do this morning? The call was at about 10 or 10:30. She's like, what did you do this morning to be like this on this call? And I said to her, actually, you know what? I did fuck all out of my usual day-to-day routine today, because I went to bed late last night. I didn't want to wake up early and feel tired for our calls, so I just allowed myself to sleep a little bit longer. It doesn't happen very often, but it literally did. We watched something on Netflix and we had to finish it because whatever, the night before. And I said to actually this morning was very different to my usual routine. It was just get up, have breakfast, have a shower, show up on the call. That's it. But because I'm at peace with it, that's what makes a difference.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing, right?
That's it. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Because I'm not being a dick to myself as much anymore. I still can be very horrible to myself. We all have that inner instinct of self-depreciation. And I was going to say especially women, but that's not true, because women tend to speak about it more openly. And guys very often invalidate themselves very quietly in their own mind or their own heart. Do you see what I mean? And they don't, we talked about at the beginning, they don't share it. They'd rather electrocute themselves than talk about their emotions.
Stop.
So it is practice, and it's patience, and
it's awareness, is right, as you say. It's awareness. You know, you talk about being at peace, and that's so powerful, because we think there are only one or two ways, and if we're not following those one or two ways, we give ourselves a hard time. There's infinite fucking ways. We're in an infinite universe governed by infinite laws with infinite energy and infinite possibilities that become infinite potentialities. And once you understand that, you don't have to go deeper than that. You just have to understand that infinite is a lot. Right? And you'll never exhaust them in your lifetime or lifetimes. You just won't.
If that is too complex, because to some people it will be like, yes, I knew it, I get it. And they take it, they run with it, and they change their life story, right? But for some, it might be just like, oh yeah, you're just chatting shit, Paul and Marta. It's like, what the fuck? Like infinite. I can't see that. My life is very limited. But in every moment, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel stressed, if you feel like you berating yourself and validating yourself, even, you know, speaking to yourself out loud or through a conversation with someone else, calling yourself an idiot or whatever, or in your mind, you can pause. If you realize this is happening, pause, stop it right there and ask yourself, is this the only way? Could I relate to it slightly differently? The program that Cliff and I have been running, the immune solution, right, which is not really truly about the immune solution as an immune system to the fucking virus, bullshit. It's the immunity and resilience physically and emotionally to whatever the fuck is going on in the world. I pushed these guys in a loving way without even realizing, because I was just downloading shit into their assignments. I invited those guys into exploring their truths, how they approach their life, how they speak to themselves, what they believe in, what they don't believe in, and physically in real time shifting perception from fear into excitement, from rage into engagement, so anger into being engaged in conversation. And when they started to understand that excitement and fear are the same energy, just different frequency based on how we interpret it, or for example, anger and passion are the same fucking energy, different frequency. When you understand that you might be coming across to yourself or someone as angry, ask yourself, am I getting angry because I'm just really fucking passionate about the subject? Very often you'll realize that you're just so involved, you care so deeply, but you're struggling to get your point across, that you get frustrated and it might come out as anger. But when you realize it's deep passion for what you're talking about and what you're sharing, you take the pressure off of yourself. You're not being as horrible to yourself. You don't feel guilty and you don't blame yourself as much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I do something very similar with clients, but the question I ask them to ask themselves in that situation, you know, between that stimulus and response, I ask them to ask the question, am I safe? So look at what you've got around you. You know, do you have shelter? Do you have food? Do you have drink? Do you have heat? You know, all these kind of basic elements that we need to survive. Are you furnished with them? Because it takes your mind out of the situation and then you can formulate your response from there. And it's that gap that I think that's really important. And look, as I said earlier, I took all these notes of all these words that you said in your opening diatribe, right, which was brilliant. And I said it would take 2 or 3 podcasts to go through them all. And here we are, we're 22 minutes later and we've only done one. Oh my God, stand by, people. So that all works really, really well and flows really well into what I wrote down next, which was surrender. Because here's another word that has a lot of negative connotations about it. To surrender is to give up. To surrender is to fail. To surrender is to finish. But actually, it's a really powerful and strong concept that we just get so wrong in our modern society these days.
Definitely. I was talking about that it could be used in so many different aspects of our life. I was talking about one of them with a client this morning over our voice messages, where it was around ideas in the business and putting things out there. She's a very creative person. She works with physically creating programs and educational content. She works with working with gems and crystals. All these bracelets are from her. She's also a writer. She's got a published, finished novel that's waiting to go into agents and to be published. So very creative. And obviously when you're so creative, often you can get yourself mumbled up in all of those different ideas, not knowing how to direct them. And I said to her, all you get to do is put out there, create and produce what excites you, what feels good, but do not expect a specific outcome. I create that bracelet and I'm going to sell that many units, or I create this program or course and I'm going to get this amount of money from that. If you follow that excitement, you know you're following your expression and you're doing what you're meant to be doing because it feels good, but the financial or emotional reward from it can come from so many different angles and avenues. And I always say that when Cliff and I do what we love, whether it's doing and running live events or creating content or courses or programs and teaching people what we teach them and whatever it might be, the reward from it, of course, it comes from the energetic exchange of our work and the financial reward from a client purchasing a course or a coaching program. But very often more clients or more exposure or whatever it might be to our work doesn't come from the direct correlation. It comes from other avenues. Someone heard about you somewhere. Someone read something seemingly randomly somewhere and gets in touch. It's being able to surrender that compulsiveness, that need to have an outcome in a very logical and specific way. And it's the same applying to, for example, lockdown, right? We're in lockdown and there's certain things we can control. We can control what we put in our mouth, whether we move, go for walks or not. We can control our sleeping pattern, morning and evening routines, rituals, whatever it is. We can have an influence on that will then have an impact on our health and well-being. But there's certain aspects we can't control. We don't know when we're going to come out of lockdown. We don't know when it's going to be the next time we're going to be able to go to a restaurant. We don't know when we're going to be able to go to a gig or a pub or whatever. We don't know these things. So we get to practice that way of going, okay, whatever I can, do something about, I'm going to look after and nurture and act on it. Whatever I can't, I get to surrender. And again, it doesn't mean weakness. It's actually freaking wisdom and that inner strength when we can go, I can control this and I'm going to look after that and do something about it. And I can't control this and I'm going to rest it. I always compare it to putting that stuff on the shelf, like an imaginary shelf, and it's shelved. We're not brushing it under the carpet because we're not avoiding it. We just can't physically influence it right now. So if I need to do something about this, this and that, but I have no control over the outcome right now, put it on the shelf. The other shit goes on a coffee table, on a work desk, whatever it is, to be acted upon, to be dealt with, to be sorted in whatever way, shape or form.
It kind of ties in with presence so very well. So that when you're present and fully aware, then it's a natural outcropping of that, isn't it? Surrender comes naturally, right? It's not something that you force. Okay, I'm going to surrender now, so there's something I have to do to surrender. That's not surrender. That's forcing.
Yeah. And a beautiful way I learned to describe it as well is that surrender is giving up the need to know the how and why and when, but our intuition is the internal guiding mechanism that will tell us when the how, the why, and the when is immediately in front of us and we're meant to act. We'll just know.
Yeah.
And when I heard that from my mentor, I was like, it's just, she's got such a beautiful way of putting shit into words. I'm like, I am adopting that. I love that.
I can take
and
that.
it's
That's
amazing. I'll take that. And it's amazing when you understand that. Giving up the idea of how and when and why, and then knowing that when the how and when and why are immediately in front of you, your intuition will tell you to go and take action.
It's a 180-degree turn, pivot, the buzzword at the moment, from our normal way of being, our normal way of looking at things, because we're more concerned with how we do things. We're more concerned with what's coming up next, what could go wrong, what's going to happen if. We're more concerned with why things happen and why we're doing stuff. We have to know all these elements. And as we said earlier, we're dealing with infinite here. There are infinite possibilities. And once you start thinking in terms of the bigger picture, the universal picture, and you say, okay, all right, I'm prepared to allow what unfolds to unfolds, waiting for the inner guidance along the way to give me a little nudge. Because when you go down a river in a dinghy, you can't control the river. That the river's going to flow. All you can do is have little inputs along the way with your rudder or your oar and just change direction slightly. That's all you can do. And that's all you should do. And that's kind of the lesson I try and get over when we're talking about surrender. And you're surrendering to the flow of the river. So you're surrendering to the flow of the universe, to the intention of the universe, to the intention of infinite intelligence, right? And all you're doing is you're having minute little inputs along the way that you see from sensory data around you. And that's all that's needed.
And those inputs very often will seem negative. Like negative experiences.
Yeah.
And
because all inputs are valid, right? All inputs are valid for awareness.
And if it wasn't for those negative inputs, those negative points of information and data insert into our experience, how would you know you're on the right track?
Exactly.
You can only know that you're on the right path for you in that moment, because there is no ultimate right path or universal right path. It's all so relative on our point of view, right? On our point of attention and desires or whatever else it might be. So whatever feels right in the moment, you can only know it feels right when you experience the inputs of what feels wrong in the moment, right? And that's only for that reason. That's only there. And I only spoke about it again yesterday. I just love how all of it comes together.
I know, it's great, right?
With our girls on our mastermind program. It was such an incredible call. We're on it for like over 2.5 hours. Just talking about the fact that this is one of the reasons why our memories get nicer and prettier over time. Why do we say that time heals all the wounds, right? Those negative data inputs, whether it's a relationship breakup or losing a friendship or whatever it might be, being in a car accident, even whatever it might be, something that might seem so very negative, over time, it kind of fades away. The negativity and the impact fades away. And it doesn't fade away because we're becoming oblivious to it or ignorant to it, it fades away because that input, the force and the strength of the data, the information we receive through that experience is no longer necessary.
Yeah.
We've learned from it, took it on board, it happened, move on.
And that's what they're there for. That's what memories are there for. Memories, they're a teaching tool. That's it, no more, no less. And you know, if we keep extracting them from the dark recesses of our memory, if we keep painting them with our interpretations and perceptions of today and putting them back, we change those memories anyway. You know,
exactly.
they have no bearing.
Memory, you change it. Yeah,
there's no bearing on what actually happened years ago. So best to learn from it, move on. I think that's an essential skill. And again, you know, it bears into what we said earlier about being kinder with yourself. We all go through ups and downs. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. It's understanding why we've developed the prefrontal cortex, even. Again, something we talked about the girls yesterday. It's understanding that we haven't fully worked out how to use it to our best advantage yet.
No.
Because we have prefrontal cortex to be able to add context to everything we're experiencing, to remember the past, to be able to project into the future. But what most of us do is we look at past as pain and painful experience, project the fear into the future so it doesn't happen again, so I'm not going to go there again. And we're stopping ourselves from being present in the now because we're constantly thinking about the pain of the past and avoiding that pain repeating itself in the future. And I said to another program we're running at the moment, I said to these guys, you continuously avoid, you stop yourself from living the life you want because you constantly avoid living the life you don't want. But what about using that ability to add context to our past experiences by learning from it, going, oh shit, I realized I didn't want this, I didn't like that, I prefer this. So right now I can use that information to create the future I desire by actually being present and aware of what's going on right now and taking the steps that are in alignment with what I want.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point and valuable point, because a mentor of mine put it, I'm going to do him a disservice now because you put it beautifully. We're talking about love. And he said that the only reason you love, or you can love, is because you've had the experience of non-love. Absolutely. And if you didn't have the experience of non-love, there will be no love in your life, and you don't want to not have love in your life. So you have to accept, acknowledge, and make peace with the non-love. You have to love non-love as much as you love love. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what he said. And that stuck with me for years and years and years.
Absolutely. And just like it is with love and the expression of it in what you just said for you, to me is with the concept of safety. I can't know that I feel unsafe if I haven't felt safe before. If I don't understand what safety is, I can't possibly say that I feel unsafe. So whenever, through the physiology that I explained, through the experiences from me being a child and having an alcoholic as a dad and him not coming home, all of this stuff that I talked about, triggering that lack of safety, I always, if it's triggered and if I feel unsafe, I always remind myself that the only reason why I feel unsafe is because I know what safe feels like and what it means to me. So it's down to me then to go, thank you, feedback. I understand I'm in a situation I don't prefer right now. How do I bring myself back to the feeling of safety? What do I require right now? Is it more on the physiological level, on the bottom of the pyramid of needs? Is it more of a survival thing that I need right now? Money, food, sleep, warmth, whatever it might be. Or is it more on a spiritual level? Did I forget about myself? Have I just been giving and giving and giving without receiving? What is it? So I'm able to analyze this. But again, it didn't happen overnight. It's years of freaking self-exploration and questioning why I feel a certain way. How can I feel in a different way? Do I have control over it? Can I make a different choice right now? And it's beautiful that we're able to explore it and talk about it, because I trust it will inspire people to become more curious and more wondrous. I always say it's about becoming more like that curious 5-year-old. And we talked about it before, I'm sure.
We did. I think we even named a podcast Be More Curious, I think,
And literally it's about being a little bit more curious and just explorative. Is there another way? If I feel the way I don't want to feel right now, if I'm experiencing something that's uncomfortable, painful, or frightening, is there a possibility that I can feel a different way? And appreciating the fact that the only reason why we can be stressed, frightened, uncomfortable, angry, sad, is because we know the opposite, because we could not physically label those feelings and emotions if we didn't know the opposite.
Yeah. And that same mentor said to me that when you can love unconditionally the non-love, the anger, the hostility, the violence, the jealousy, the rage, as much as you love the joyfulness, the blissfulness, the happiness, the peace, the calm, until you can love equally, because one's showing you the other, and without one you can't have the other, until you are able to bring those together and merge them into one, that's when you find unity, that's when you find peace, that's when you become not necessarily enlightened, but that's when you become fully aware.
That's when you find unity in the duality, right? I'll show you someone who knows how to love unconditionally.
Look at that. Yes. It was about time he made an appearance.
She's your
sorry.
girl. I'm your.
Right. Oh, bless.
I won't take it personally, Paul. It's okay.
It's fine. Just glorious,
honestly,
right?
If you,
glorious. Just glorious.
Yeah. If you think about, there is no other love than unconditional love, right? Because if it's conditional, it's not love.
Not love, right?
It's very challenging for us as humans to just grasp and get our head around. But someone like her doesn't care. Something might hurt, something might not be the way she wants, but then the next thing she shakes it off and moves on with her life, being just as loving as she was before.
And you know what I love about dogs? It doesn't matter what mood you are in, they love you unconditionally, no matter what.
Yep.
And that is just beautiful.
In a horrible, shitty mood.
Yeah.
And they'll still come and love you just as much as they love you when you're happy.
It's crazy. It's
beautiful
crazy.
Teachers. And it's taking the fact that, yes, our brains might have evolved a little bit more in terms of being able to process emotions and remember the past, project into the future, but use it as an example that we can learn from them and remember what it was like before we had that ability, and use that ability to our advantage rather than continuously limit ourselves, put ourselves into even more internal fear and internal shutdown, and blocking all the beautiful gifts that we have because of being able to experience emotions in the way we do as humans, right?
Yeah. The Tao of dogs, right?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
A client of ours last year, when we went to Colombia on one of our plant medicine retreats, he literally, after one of the ceremonies, wrote an entire book called Conversations with Dog, which was obviously paraphrasing from Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, but it was literally an entire book in one night. He filled up a journal that was that thick.
No way.
Conversations with Dog. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Still hasn't freaking got it published. But it was amazing when he started reading some of the wisdom that was coming out. It was literally him going for a walk with his dog and his dog talking back to him and answering questions.
Oh, do you know, that would be my idea of heaven. That really would. That would be a conversation and a half. It really would. Well, as I said, Marta, you know, we had all these words that you came up with initially, and there were so many. And we've spoken about 2 in like 50 minutes. So we've not done bad. Yeah, that's a good number. That's a good number. So we've got so much more to go through at a later date in our next month's podcast.
Amazing.
But once again, I want to thank you so very, very much for taking the time out of your insanely busy schedule to bring your warmth and your love and your wisdom to our listeners.
Anytime. It's our self-care, isn't it? Like I said at the beginning.
It is. And as I say, it really helps me. And I know you said the same. So I'm so thankful for having you once a month on these calls.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Paul.
Pleasure. Thank you.